What's up YouTube? It's me, Carol Kruppenbacher. Students, you can call me Mrs. K. This video is going to be about Chapter 1, Lesson 2 on how to display categorical data. Alright, before we jump into last class's homework, I want to make sure that you know that there's an introduction video to this entire class. You can find it on my website at www.ckmathteacher.com. Or you can also visit my YouTube channel, ckmathteacher, and subscribe and get the notifications to know when a new video is up. On the introduction video, I tell you what kinds of things I'm going to be using throughout the year and where you can find all this information on that video. So I highly recommend going there first before jumping into these courses. So in the last class, we talked about why statistics, right? Why is statistics important in our everyday life, in your workplace, everywhere, all around us. We talked about vocabulary words like statistics, what an individual was, what a variable was, what an identifier was. We also talked about how variables can be classified as quantitative or categorical. So if you missed that lesson, go ahead and watch that before this lesson because it gives you a little bit more information. I will also link that video down below. All right, let's get into your homework. I assigned for you to do number 2 and number 3 from StatsMedic's lesson 1.1. I will also link this homework assignment below this video on YouTube. That way you can just easily click the link, okay? How are your favorite classes related? So I only asked you to do number 2 and number 3, so you technically didn't have to do number 1. And the reason why you can't do number 1 is because I don't actually have a class. I would ask the kids to go up to the board and put a tally on their favorite elective class between art, music, or PE, foreign language, and technology. But because I don't have a class, what I did instead was I put a poll on Instagram and I asked my friends on there what their favorite elective was between the 4, art, music, physical education, foreign language, because Instagram doesn't allow 5 choices. So if you're on my online YouTube channel, I will not be including technology on here, so I just scratched that out, put total instead. So the responses that we got are 21 for art, 19 for music, 11 for physical education, and 16 for foreign language. Again, we're gonna cross off technology and instead just put total on here. And the reason why is because Instagram only had 4 options, not 5. So I can only put art, music, physical education, and foreign language, okay? So we're just gonna stick to that. But the original document has technology on there and you can go to StatsMedic.com to find the original document. Number 1, we already did, great. Number 2, identify the individuals and the variable, okay? So you're asked to identify 2 things, the individuals and the variable. So first, the individuals. Who are we collecting data on, right? That would be the question you should be asking yourself. Individual. Who is the individual? Who are we collecting data on? This example is a little weird because if I was a teacher in my actual classroom, obviously the individuals would be the students, right? I'm collecting data on the students. However, since I don't have a physical course, instead I asked my social media friends. So in this case, the individual would be Mrs. Kruppenbacher's, or we'll put Mrs. K's Instagram, friends, followers, whoever. The variable, what is being collected? What are we collecting? What are we asking all my Instagram fams, Instagram friends, Instagram followers? What did I ask them? I asked them what their favorite elective class was, okay? So the variable was the variable that's being collected is your favorite elective class. Favorite elective class. Okay. Is the variable categorical or quantitative? Okay, so we've already covered this, categorical or quantitative, in lesson 1. So if you didn't see that lesson, go ahead and go back and watch that. So we are collecting information on favorite elective class. What did you think that was? Categorical or quantitative? I hope you said categorical, right? These aren't even numbers, so I wouldn't even think quantitative. So art, music, physical education, foreign language are categorical variables. The variable is categorical. Is categorical. And then if you want to be specific to context, you can even put favorite elective class. fave elective class. They say as long as you talk about the context at least once in answering your FRQs, then you're good to go. Honestly, I would be as redundant as possible so that just in case they missed it, they don't, because you've said it not just once, but twice at least, or 3 times if you want to be safe. But 1 time is usually enough. Okay, so the variable is categorical, which is the favorite elective class. So that was your homework. Now we're going to go to our lesson. So our learning targets. Represent and describe categorical data using frequency and relative frequency tables. Decide if a pie chart would be an appropriate graph for the data. Make and interpret bar graphs. Identify what makes some graphs misleading. Okay, so let's jump in straight into the notes. Let's start this lesson off taking notes on a few vocabulary words that we're going to want to know. First, distribution. Distribution tells us what value or what values the variable takes and how often it takes those values. I also want to mention that all my definitions will come from the Practice of Statistics, the TPS textbook that I talked about in the introduction. I will also link that textbook down below so that you can buy it. I will make sure to reference what page I got the definition from. Highly recommend the textbook. I think it's one of my favorite ones to use for the AP Stats course. So a distribution basically tells you what are all the different values and how many of each did it hit. I want you to be able to use that in your vocabulary when you're talking to other statisticians, right? If you look at the bottom of our notes page, we have Jeep colors. So that's a variable, right? Jeep colors. And I listed on there black, gray, white, and other. And we're about to get into the frequency or how many times each of those values were hit. Before we get into that, I want to talk about the 2 tables that you're probably going to see in class or on your exam, which is a frequency table and a relative frequency table. So they pretty much sound the same, right? Frequency table, relative frequency table. So they're very similar. The only difference is this relative part of relative frequency table. Okay, and I will explain what that means. Let's first talk about frequency table. Frequency table shows the number of individuals. Remember, individuals are who we are collecting data from, having each value. And a relative frequency table shows the proportion or percent of individuals having each value. So, I mean, even the definitions look almost exactly the same. The only part of the definitions here that are different is the number and the proportion or percent. So a frequency table tells you the number, right? It's a count, it's a frequency, how many times you spit out a number. A relative frequency table shows the proportion or percent, right? Another way to think about this is like a fraction, you know, our favorite word problems and fractions. So if you are getting a relative frequency table, you're not going to get a table that tells you how many in counts, right? Like numbers. It's going to tell you a percentage. Is it 20% of the entire thing? Is it 50%? Is it half? Is it only just a tiny bit? 1%? That is a relative frequency table. Okay, we're about to get into an example. So I'm going to skip round off error and go into the example, and then we'll go back and fill up what round error is. I think it'll make more sense that way. So reading this, again, I want you to visualize the problem in your head. So as I'm reading it, I don't want you to just be looking at the words like how I used to when I used to read, right? I want you to really think, okay, Miss K wanted to know how many other Jeeps there were available to rent on island. Okay, Miss K, me, who is interested to know how many other Jeeps are on this island for rent, okay? I really want you to be engaging in your reading, and not just with me, but everywhere in all your classes, right? I think that's one of the biggest issues with reading comprehension is some of us don't really understand our reading. Like we can read the words, but are we really comprehending what the words are saying or like what the story is about? So let's read the story. Let's think about it at the same time. Mrs. K wanted to know how many other Jeeps there were available to rent on island through the car sharing app Turo. She conducted a search and tallied the data. Let's create a frequency table and relative frequency table to organize the information. Okay, so you're asked to do two things. We are going to make a frequency table and a relative frequency table. Remember, frequency table is just counts. How many? And if I look at my data from way back when, 38 is the number of black Jeeps. For gray Jeeps, we have 37. For white Jeeps, we have 39. And for other Jeeps, which is like all the other colors, green, blue, orange, yellow, all that, I found 55. Some frequency tables are gonna give you some space for a total amount, just so you know how many Jeeps there are total. I highly recommend training yourself to want to know the total. And the reason why you're gonna wanna know the total is that it's going to give you your denominator that you're going to use for your relative frequency table. Okay, the table that we're about to do next. So let's go ahead and add up 38, 37, 39, and 55. Obviously do this by hand and in your head, but on a high stakes test, like I would just double check your work and use a calculator. Like we have technology nowadays to be able to use this. All right, so you're going to add up all these numbers using your calculator. We have 38, 37, 39, and 55. Okay, so that gives me a total of 169. Hopefully you checked my work, make sure I'm doing it right. So if you see a mistake, please say something or comment below. All right, so we got the total, which was 169. Let's move on to find our relative frequency table. So again, a relative frequency table gives you the proportion, right? So we want to know how many black Jeeps there are in a percentage, in the form of a percent, okay? So in order to do that, you're gonna have to know what the total is because you're gonna have to divide. We have 38 black Jeeps according to our notes here. So we're gonna have to divide 38 divided by 169. And I'm gonna put that on here. Sorry, there's a little bit of space. I will edit that for next time. So I'm going to put approximation symbols here. That way you know that we are rounding this off. So if I do 38 divided by 169 on the calculator, I'm going to do 38 divided by 169. That gives me 0.224852071. So I hope you know how to round. And if you don't know how to round, I will do a short on how to round. So our answer is 0.224852071. You are not expected to write all of that down on the AP exam. I recommend doing it to the fourth space after that decimal. So we would put 0.224, and now we have to decide, are we going to write that 8 down or are we going to write a 9 down? And in order to decide this, you're going to have to look at the number after the 8. The number after the 8 is a 5. So the rule is if it's 4 or below, the 8 stays, right? Safe, keep the 8. If it's 5 or up, so 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9, then that 8 becomes a 9. It gets pushed over to become a 9. So in this case, it's going to become a 9 because 5 is 5 or greater. Okay, so we're going to round that off to 0.2249. Okay, so we're going to move that decimal 2 spaces to the right for 22.49%. So we're going to do it for the gray Jeeps, the white Jeeps, and the other colored Jeeps. So gray Jeeps, there were 37 out of 169. So we're going to do the same exact thing we just did. 37 divided by 169. 37 divided by 169. That's going to be 0.2189349. So we're not going to have to include all that. So this is going to be 0.2189. 2189. So remember, you're being asked to round to the fourth digit after the decimal, and the fourth digit is a 9. So you're going to rely on the number after that, which is a 3, to determine whether or not the 9 turns into the next number, which is a 10, or stays at 9. The next number after 9 is 3. Is that 4 and below? Yes, 3 is below 4, so 9 will stay. That's why it's 0.2189. Now, change that into a percentage. It's already in decimal form, so we're going to move that decimal 2 spaces to the right. Okay, so I'm gonna just blow that up so you can see what I mean. So if you want to turn 0.2189 into a percentage, all you have to do is move that decimal 2 spaces over to the right. The reason why you have to do that is because we're actually multiplying by 100. And when we do that, it literally just moves the decimal over 2 spaces to the right. So that's going to be 21.89%, okay? So that's going to be 21.89%. Okay, so I did black and gray with you. I want you to try and do white and other Jeep colors on your own for filling up this relative frequency table. I'm gonna give you 5 seconds to press pause on your device, and that way you can try it. Take as much time as you need, just in 5 seconds. The video will continue to move on. Just make sure you pause it, okay? So in 3, in 2, and in 1, go. 5 seconds has elapsed, so we are back. For white, I hope you got 39 over 169. So 39 over 69 is going to be 0.2307. Does that turn into an 8 or stay as a 7? It turns into an 8 because the number after it is 6. That's 5 or greater. So to turn that into a percentage, you have to move the decimal 2 spaces to the right. That's going to make it 23.08%. And for other, you should have got 55 divided by 169. And if you divide that, you would get 0.3254. Does that turn into a 5 or does that stay a 4? The number after it is a 4, so it's going to stay since it's 4 or below. That's going to be 0.3254. And that's going to turn into 32.54%. Now, if you add up all those percentages, what do you think you're going to get? What number would you expect to get? I hope you're thinking 100%, right? If those are all the colors of the Jeep colors that I found on Turo, black, gray, white, other, then if we add all those up, that should add up to the total, which is 100%, right? I hope that makes sense. I hope you're on the bus. We've got 22.49 plus 21.89 plus, okay, so I messed up right here. I put 2.89 and I was supposed to put 21.89. So you know you can move left and right on the arrow circular pad to be able to move that blinky spot back and forth, and you can go ahead and just fix your work. You could insert a 1 in here, and to do that, you would want to make sure you press insert. If you look for INS, I-N-S on the calculator, it's going to be in blue above the button del for delete. So if you want to press insert, it's in blue, so that means you have to actually push the second button first. So if you press second, insert, you're able to insert something you want in front of that decimal that the blinky light is on right now, right? So I'm gonna put a 1 in front of it. So now that inserted a 1 in front of the spot that I wanted it to insert it in front. In our case, it's the decimal because I forgot the 1 in 21.89. And then you can use the arrows back to go back to where you want it to be. You want the blinky light to be on a blank space so that it doesn't cover anything that you've already had previously, okay? 23.08 plus 32.54. And that adds up to 100%, okay? So your total should be 100%. Now, let's talk about round off error. Let's pretend you're a kid and you're like, Miss K, she doesn't know anything. I don't want to round it to the 4th digit after the decimal spot. Instead, you want to just round it off to a whole number percentage, okay? The cool thing about the TI-84 calculators is you can go back and review your work. So if I press the up button from having added that, it's going to take me to my old work. It's going to highlight everything. So I want to see all the percentages that we calculated. So starting with the 38 divided by 169. If I had just done like 2 spots after the decimal, which would make it 22%, right? Let's just pretend that I did 22%. I was lazy and I didn't want to round to the 4th digit after the decimal. Next, This is 22%. Why is this 22%? Because if I'm routing to the second spot, which is 21, I have to look at the number after that, which is 8. Is 8 5 or greater? Yes. So that means the 1 will turn to a 2. So that's 22%. For the white Jeeps, 2307. 0.2307. This will be 23%. And the other Jeep colors, which is 55 divided by 169, that was 0.3254. So will that be 32% or will that be 33%? That will be 33%. Now let's add up those numbers, okay? If you want to go back to the part where you can use your calculator, just press down all the way and it'll take you to a blank spot. So let's add up those numbers. We have 22 plus 22 plus 23 plus 33. Let's add it up to 100%. Oh man. Okay, so sometimes you'll get an answer of like 101 or 99%. And the reason why you get a number like 99 or 101% and not 100%, you've done a little bit of rounding off. And so we call that round off error. Round off error is the difference between the calculated approximation of a number and its exact mathematical value. I was hoping this would add up to 101%, so I can show you that sometimes when you round up to a whole number, it doesn't add up completely to 100, but this wasn't the example. Hopefully the one for homework will be. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and jump to the next page of our notes. So the definition of these are going to be exactly what the word says. A bar graph is going to be a graph that shows each category as a bar, the heights of the bar, of the bars will show frequency or relative frequency. A pie chart is going to be a chart that shows each category as a slice of a pie. Areas are proportional to the frequency and relative frequency. Okay, so a bar graph is a graph that has bars, and then a pie chart is a circle chart that has each category shaped as pies. So let's give you an example. So we're going to make a bar graph of the distribution of Jeep colors that I found on Turo. So when you make your graph, you're gonna want your X and Y axis. We're gonna use the first quadrant of the graph, which is going to be the top right side. We have 4 different Jeep colors, so we're gonna have 4 different bars, and you want them to be spaced out pretty evenly. So if I'm gonna make 4 bars, I'm just going to make little tally marks for where my bars are going to be. So this could be like where the first bar will be, and then the space, and then the second bar, and then a space, and then the third bar, and then a space, and then the fourth bar. And you can do this as you go also. You don't have to do it at the very beginning, but I like to. So my first bar can be black Jeeps. I'm gonna write the slanted black Jeeps. And then this one's going to be gray Jeeps. And then the next bar is going to be white Jeeps. And then the next bar is going to be other. And if you feel like this is not enough space, then you can go ahead and draw the bar graph on this side and then draw the pie chart on the other side. So on the bottom, this axis is going to be labeled Jeep colors, right? Because these are what the bars are. On the side, this is going to be the frequency. And remember, frequency is just a fancy way to say how many, like the count. So for black Jeeps, the frequency was 38, gray 37, white 39, and other 55. So the highest bar that you're going to have is going to be 55. 55 is kind of already a pretty number. I would recommend making your tallies go by fives, since you can just do 5, 10, 15, 20. But sometimes you'll get like a weird number, like 39. Let's say that was the max. You don't want to make your maximum 39. Like, you might as well just push it over to the next one and make your maximum 40. But in this case, our maximum will be 55, because that will cover all the other Jeeps, right? Black, gray, white, and other, it's 55 or below. So my vertical axis is going to go all the way up to 55. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55. And you can go back and label all of these if you want to. And you don't have to label every single one. You just have to make sure that you are spacing them out equally. That way the reader can understand, like, okay, the student is going by fives, right? And you don't have to label every single one, as long as every other one at least is labeled. So black is gonna go all the way up to 38, and that's going to be past 35. So it's gonna go all the way up to a little bit halfway, past the halfway mark, and then bam, there's your first bar, black Jeeps. Because we are not computers, like, I would automatically put the number, the frequency of the black Jeeps on the top of the bar. That way your reader knows, okay, this bar means 38. And it's not a question of, you know, are you graphing the bar correctly? The next bar is gray, 37. So it's going to be slightly lower than the 38. And again, I recommend putting that 37 on top of that bar. That way the reader knows that you meant that bar meant 37. Same thing for white is going to be 39, which is going to be slightly more than the 38. And then other is going to be 55, and that's going to go all the way to the max part of our graph, which is going to be 55. Notice that I've labeled my bar graph. We've labeled this Jeep colors, and also the axis here is going to be frequency. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into the StatsMedic app so that we can use some technology to graph this for us. And also we're gonna use that as a segue to get into pie chart so that we can just copy the pie chart. The first thing you wanna do is go to the StatsMedic app, which is going to be www.statsmedic.com. When you get to the StatsMedic website, you're gonna see data analysis, probability, concepts, and big bold letters. Under data analysis, I want you to click on one categorical variable for single group, and then it's going to take you to this page. All right, so for the variable name, we're going to list our variable, which in this case was Jeep colors. And then for category name, it's going to be all the different colors for the Jeeps that we have. So that's going to be black, gray. We're going to add 2 more rows by clicking on this plus button right here. And we're going to label those white and other respectively. And I will talk about what respectively means later. And then the frequency, we're gonna type in exactly how it shows on our table, which is going to be 38 for black, 37 for gray, 39 for white, and 55 for all the other Jeep colors. And then if we go ahead and select begin analysis, it's going to have this nicely built bar chart available for us here. Okay, which is the same kind of bar chart that we drew on our notes here. If you look at the bottom, it gives you the summary statistics. So this is all the different colors of the Jeep, the frequencies, and the relative frequencies. Notice how it changed it into percentages. And if you compare it to ours, they rounded theirs to the 3rd digit after the decimal, which is actually allowed, but I always push for the 4th just in case. So this bar graph should look exactly like the kind that we drew on our notes. And we jumped on here so that we can take a look to see what a pie chart would look like, and then just copy that on our notes really quick. So if I pick plot type, it's gonna give you the 2 other options, a segmented bar chart, which is going to be something that we're gonna cover in the next lesson or 2, and then pie chart, which is what we want. So if we click pie chart, it changes it for you into a nice pie chart. Darker blue part is the black Jeeps, 22.5%. The gray, the lighter blue is 21.9, and then you have white and other. And this is the pie chart that we are going to copy on our notes right now. So you want to draw a circle as best as possible on your paper. For the pie chart, we understand that you're not a computer, so if you don't draw the most perfect circle that's out there, then you're not going to get in trouble. But just try and draw it as close as possible. So for the bar graph, we use the counts, the frequencies. For the pie chart, we're going to use the relative frequencies. So we're going to use the percentages. If I was going to draw a pie chart on the AP exam, and I'm not sure if I would ever really do that, but if I decided to, the way you could do it is just go little by little. I have 22.5% black Jeeps on Turo. So I would just start at the middle mark. So when I draw my mark, it's going to be slightly above it. And if you're like slightly off, it's okay. Again, we know you're not computers. The only thing is I highly recommend making sure you label everything. That way it's not confusing for the reader, okay? So these represent the black Jeep population, and that's 22.5%, okay? And I even labeled how much that is. 21.9, 23.1, they're really not that far away from each other, to be honest. So it's gonna be similar to this kind of pie. You know it's not going to go all the way to 50%, right? Because 22 and 21 don't add up to 50. So it's gonna be short of that. It actually adds up to what? 43, 44 and some change. So it's going to be like right here, probably. And again, you are not a computer. Nobody expects you to be. Just label your stuff. That way the reader knows what you're doing. All right, next we've got 32.5%. So I'm just gonna go the opposite way. This is 25%, and then you've got 32.5%. And so it's gonna be like right here, something like that. Okay, and then this is going to be the other group that I did kind of just backwards, 32.5%. And then the leftover is obviously the white because it has to be the leftover of it. And that's 23.1%. So what I did there was I did the black and the gray on one side, and then I jumped over to the other side because I can use that middle mark to go how many percent of the circle. For pie charts, you want to make sure that the only time you're using this is if you're using all of the data, right? Because you want it to be out of 100%. So you won't be able to do that if you're only looking at one piece of the whole thing. For pie charts, you want to make sure you're looking at all of them. So this is your pie chart, and of course you want to make sure that you label these. This is going to be the distribution of Jeep colors. And before we close out this lesson, I want to talk about two important things, or two things that you should look out for in terms of graphs. Because there's going to be a lot of data and presentation of data that's out there, and you really have to be the kind of person that watches out for the kinds of things that they show you, okay? One thing to look out for are pictographs. So pictographs are basically graphs that use pictures instead of bars. Now the problem with pictures is that it gets bigger, wider, as well as in height. The area is just getting bigger, and for our eyes that makes a huge difference in the way our eyes see things, so they are misleading. So stick to bars. So pictographs are misleading. I highly recommend just sticking to bars. The next thing I want to point out are the axes, okay? I want to make sure that you are starting your axis off at 0, not at whatever number. Look at our picture here. Like imagine if we are taking a look at our graph here, and instead of starting at 0, we're starting it at 35, right? We start the 35 down here, and now what we're going to see is we're going to have a little bit at 38, 37, 39, and then a whole bunch more at 55. We don't want that. So we want to be able to see the whole picture, and it really helps when you start your axis off at 0. And let's write that down. Watch the axis. Watch the axes. Make sure they start at 0. Okay? Okay, so let's go over the homework. The homework is going to be on the same homework assignment that we went over at the beginning of this lesson, which was the how are your favorite classes related. We just finished 1, 2, and 3. Now I want you to do number 4 and graph our favorite electives on the StatsMedic app and put them on your homework. Okay, so your homework is going to be number 4 from StatsMedic. Lesson 1, How are your favorite classes related? Okay, so that is your homework. Number 4 from StatsMedic, how are your favorite classes related? And then I will talk about this homework in the next lesson, chapter 1, lesson 3. All right, so I just want to thank you guys for joining us for our chapter 1, lesson 2, displaying categorical data. I will see you in the next class, chapter 1, lesson 3. Stay tuned. Please follow, subscribe, talk about this channel with your coworkers, your friends, your family, anyone who's in high school math, especially AP Statistics. I hope that these videos help you. I hope that you're on the bus, and I will see you next class. Take care. Bye.